April 17th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Franciak, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Carter.
Present.
Mr. Young.
Present.
Mr. Walters.
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall. Ms. Hubick. Thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton and then Mr. Walters.
I move to excuse Ms. Hubick from tonight's meeting.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Mr. Young to excuse Ms. Hubick. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Mr. Walters.
Mr. McDougall indicates that he's out of the country on business and would like to be excused, so I move to excuse Mr. McDougall's absence.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Walters, second by Ms. Cleland McGrath to excuse Mr. McDougall. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, good crowd tonight. Thanks for you all for coming. And I've got a couple announcements. We are on item number 3, which is announcements and committee reports. If you have not yet received it, you should be receiving it any day now in your mailbox. A-Town is Our Town magazine. Appreciate all the work that staff put into that and all the great inputs that we got there. And a lot of really wealth of information about activities coming up in Anacortes. Also, another little public service announcement, fiber. There's an opportunity if you're ready to take an immediate appointment, just the way things have fallen out. If you're in a service area and you want to get an immediate appointment, meaning you got to go to the map and make sure you're in the green area, but 360-588-8300. Again, we're hooking folks up as fast as possible, but there's a couple opportunities to maybe get in there right now. Washington State Ferries, a quick announcement there. The Washington State Ferries is rewriting its Anacortes to San Juan Island schedules, and that hasn't been done for, I think, 10 years. So Washington State Ferries is soliciting applications from area community members interested in joining a task force for that project. Again, it hasn't been updated in a decade. The Anacortes San Juan Island sailing schedules, and again, this does not involve Anacortes to Sydney. But again, they're looking to, the effort will be about a year long, and it'll allow the Washington State Ferries to implement a new sailing schedule before the 2024 schedule. So it's encouraging community members who regularly ride the Anacortes San Juan Islands ferry route, and also they're looking for about 25 people that will include the San Juan County Ferry Advisory Committee, along with Anacortes and San Juan Islands community representatives. So those wishing to be a part of it, please apply before the 21st, which is this Friday. And there's more information about on our website or the Washington State Ferries website. And let's see, Heart Lake opens this Friday, the 22nd, which also coincides with Earth Day. So as always, when you're using our wonderful parks and forest lands, do what my mom always told me, try to leave the place better than you found it. It's always a good rule, and it's too cold for me to swim, but Heart Lake will open on Friday, on the 22nd, Saturday. And that is it, and we're on to Finance Committee report, 3A.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
The Finance Committee met last week. We talked about a couple of topics, starting with our OpenGov transparency portal. We have provided some recommendations to the Finance Department on how they might update that portal to better reflect what people expect to be able to see, the public specifically be able to see, when they look at that OpenGov portal and try to look through our finances. Probably quite a bit more to say about that, and we can talk about that in our either our budget retreat or during the budget process. But we're looking to improve that and make it more usable for the public and for council moving forward. We talked about our utility bill discount program, and staff are going to do a little bit more research on what it is they can do with our existing software to implement that discount. Right now, there are a whole number of clicks that they use on our existing discount, and if they could reduce the number of clicks, they could save time and save money. However, it does bring to mind the fact that our our enterprise management system software, the Eden system, as it is named, has reached end of life, and we need to be looking at a replacement for that. There are a couple of options. The planning department used to use Eden and has now moved into new software. So we can componentize that. We can do that in a couple of different ways, or we could look for another enterprise replacement. That's probably a significant expense, maybe $1 million. It's something that we need to plan for and need to get ahead of well before the point at which we really can't use Eden or expect any more updates to it. So we have, again, encouraged that we get started on that process right away. We talked a little bit about how we're paying for the fire station property, and I think the upshot of that discussion is that we'll continue to just handle it with our existing cash flow until such time as we figure out how we're going to finance the fiber effort this year. And so that's probably something that gets resolved this year. And then Mr. Hoagland solicited our views on what improvements or objectives or suggestions we have for the budget process for 2024, and that, of course, extends to the rest of council as well. We had a little bit of a brainstorming session, and we'll do more in upcoming meetings.
Okay, thank you. Next is 3B, which is Public Works Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. The Public Works Committee met at 5 p.m. today, and it was Mr. Young, Mr. Walters, Public Works Director Henry Hash, and Public Works Administrator Sydney Neal were at the meeting today, and also Engineer Tim Homan. We talked about 4 projects that have gone out to bid that the city has received bids on that will be coming to us next week. Some of them came in under the engineer's estimate, some of them came in over, but in general, pretty reasonable, and those will be detailed in next week's packet. They have to do with asphalt overlay, sidewalk infrastructure improvements on Hillcrest up by the cemetery, sanitary sewer line rehabilitation, and a clarifier drive installation project at the wastewater treatment plant. So various facets of infrastructure. We heard about the potential of the city obtaining a new paver. We have a small one that the city bought in 2017. A new one would give us a lot of opportunity to do more of our own projects instead of going out to bid. And the paver costs $150,000, but we strongly believe that it will pay for itself in the first year by helping us do some of these projects ourselves in the future. So that was a good news. And then we talked about our traffic safety committee that meets quarterly, a separate committee from the Public Works, and the potential of rolling traffic safety into Public Works to streamline it and make it more efficient and just maybe potentially improve the way we do things. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Next up is item 3C, Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee.
Yeah, Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleland.
Thank you. So we had our committee meeting on April 13th. It was a pretty brief one. Ms. Moulton and myself were there. And we had our new program coordinator run the meeting, Stephanie Snyder, and that was wonderful to get to meet her and have her on board now. We had the meeting just consisted of the fact that as a committee, we really feel that it's important that we coordinate our expectations and our policy for folks that are living on the streets or in right-of-ways so that they have clear expectations and guidelines, that we understand what those expectations and guidelines are, and that also the general public can understand those expectations and guidelines. So, and not duplicating services, not having conflicting things said to those folks and to the general public. And so we are going to host a roundtable with some of the major stakeholders who do outreach to those folks and make sure that we all have similar expectations and that we are guiding a effective use of resources. And then we just had a quick talk about the fact that we've seen some change on T Avenue, that some of those folks have moved to other areas of town. And we just wanted to make sure that our outreach team is aware of where those people have moved and are continuing to touch base with them and provide services and kind of keep tabs on where folks are throughout the community. And then we realized we need to do some more work on the some of our, the Habitat for Humanity lease. So we are working on that. I know that that's been of interest to folks, but we've got a little more work to do on that. And that was it.
Okay, thank
Mayor
you.
Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Also, the planning committee met at 3:30 today with the Arts Festival for the purpose of evaluating their proposed new lease for the Anacortes Cinema building. As you all might recall, back on November 28th, the Arts Festival presented to City Council, and at that meeting, City Council suggested that the Planning Committee meet with the Arts Festival to try to work out lease details. So we did that immediately. December 2nd, we met with the Arts Festival. Sometime in February, we got a draft lease from the Arts Festival. We then met internally 2 weeks ago to go over that proposed lease, and then we met today with the Arts Festival representatives. I think it's safe to say that generally we are supportive and excited about their arts center concept and about the idea of it helping anchor downtown, especially in advance of new development on the waterfront, MJB's development specifically. However, there are a number of lease issues to be figured out, and we wanted to also encourage them to take a broader look at orientation of the building, how it can be integrated with the heart of Anacortes, how can we ensure that we manage parking, because their proposed lease said the city will participate in figuring out parking, which obviously we will try to figure out parking for downtown, but we're not very interested in being responsible for parking for the Arts Center. The Arts Festival also said that they are willing to do and commit to doing movies in the new facility, possibly movies that can't be streamed. They have a film selection committee. They're not committing to do first-run movies. They are looking to create a space that is self-sustaining, sustainable for them financially, and so they are possibly looking at doing residential above, using that vertical space. Of course, that adds costs to their project. So because of the uncertainty in exactly what they are doing, we are asking more questions about what do you plan on the space. That means that will make a difference in what we can reasonably charge for the ground. We'll need to work those details out and have a little bit more certainty about their proposal, but otherwise we think that there's really no reason we can't get to a yes eventually here. It is going to take some additional time. So we plan to meet again in 2 or 3 weeks, I think, 2 weeks maybe, and then I think we set a 2-week meeting after that as well to continue the discussion and eventually come to some conclusion. We'll keep you apprised of our progress.
All right. Thanks. Any other announcements and committee reports from council? Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, which is public comment, and this is an opportunity for any member of the public that wishes to address council on anything that is not on our agenda, and I've got a few folks signed up, and again, I'll ask you to state your name and where you live for the record. You just have to give the city, but the reason for that, even if I say your name, I've probably mispronounced it or something and want to make sure that Mr. Franciac can get it in the record. So first up, I have Sarah Hollerhan. Topic is trees.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the audience. My name is Sarah Hollerhan. I live at 151 138th Street. I'm here to talk about trees. And first of all, thank you for your stewardship of the forest lands. It's an amazing gem for our city. And I want to applaud the Forest Advisory Committee and Bob Vokes for getting started on the update to the plan, the management plan, so we can have a really great scientifically based plan. But As you can tell, I'm a big fan of trees, but tonight I want to bring your attention to a different aspect of trees, our urban canopy. Am I in the right? Am I too loud? Okay.
That's good.
While we're so excited to have protected so many acres of forest land, I don't believe we've done enough for our street trees. They offer different but immense benefits. For instance, they reduce heat islands, and don't laugh because I know it's freezing cold in April, but in the summer it gets really hot, and they can lower energy costs. They act as a biological filter for pollution, and they help with stormwater, and they offer really positive psychological benefits, connecting people to nature every single day. According to the National Arbor Day Foundation, Anacortes has been a Tree City USA for 21 years. You all see the sign coming into town. However, there are 4 standards to be a Tree City USA, and I printed them off to give you. And I don't believe we're really meeting those expectations. First of all, we're supposed to have a tree care ordinance. We do have tree preservation section, which is more about new development. So we really need a better program, educating people what kind of trees to plant, how to care for them, and to promote planting trees. We're also supposed to have an Arbor Day observation and a proclamation. And maybe I'm just missing this on the calendar, but I didn't see that we were doing that this year. And Arbor Day for Washington was April 12th. I think different places have different days. But very most important, we're supposed to have a tree board or department, according to the Arbor Day. But actually, in our municipal code, and I hope you will reread chapter 2.46, it is, quote, "Street Tree Advisory Committee is hereby established." And it clearly lists the groups that will be represented on the Street Tree Committee. So one of the listed functions is to have regular meetings where the members of the committee, as well as others interested in the tree program. So I ask you leaders to recognize the need for reestablishing this committee. I've heard it was only intended for downtown, but that was during the initial phase from 2001. It's time to really create this tree committee so we can have real plans and policy for our street trees. Now, I walk home from downtown up to 38th and M, and I've counted, there's sometimes less than 5 trees along the sidewalk to provide any shade or beauty. We are trying to have a livable city. We're trying to have denser developments. We need street trees. So I hope that you will reinstate that, and I look forward to the first 2023 meeting of the Street Tree Advisory Committee. And sorry I went over.
Thank you. All right, next up is Mark McKeithron, and his topic is health and safety.
Mayor Miller and council, audience, I'd like to talk about health and safety tonight. Since the breakup of the T Avenue RV Park, apparently the TripAdvisor went out, and the 6th Street has now become the new RV destination for Anacortes. We currently have 5 RVs, multiple cars, and this has brought traffic that we haven't quite seen for a while. They like to park diagonal, cars come and go all day long. They park backwards. And we notice that people go into the RVs, they come out in a few minutes. Some will go back to their cars, some leave. And we've had to have at least 3 well checks in the last bit, including one this past weekend, where 3 people were passed out unconscious in their car. The police did come, arrested or put in handcuffs some of them, put them in the back of their car, and in about 5 minutes they all were released and they get back in their cars. Some of them get in their cars and they drive off again. That in itself, I would hope, would scare you as you're driving down the road too. Rather than question their right to do this, this could be debated all day long. I want to point out that there is a current state Washington law, RCW 69.50435, that says within 1,000 feet of a designated school bus stop, All fines, penalties can be doubled for those selling, manufacturing, and delivering a controlled substance. The corner of 6th and T is a designated bus stop. In fact, all of 6th Street is within 350 feet of this bus stop. This 1,000 feet even extends into the depot area. This is a liability issue for the kids. Heaven forbid they pick up increased garbage, potential paraphernalia as they're walking past this. I believe it has a high degree of risk for them and for the city as a liability issue, since this has been a fact and it is stated. I'm asking for encouragement for you to encourage the police officers to please do more patrols, send out the drug dog, set up surveillance, pass this parking ordinance, and please help protect our Anacortes children, and let's make Anacortes safe again. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mary Ann Ryan. Topic is health and safety.
My name is Mary Ann Ryan, and I live near Capsani in Anacortes. Did I start the thing correct?
Yep.
Okay.
A little bit closer maybe to the microphone.
Okay. I don't have so thank you, Mayor Miller, council, and the audience, citizens. I don't have a prepared statement or anything, but I live close to where now all the RVs are parked, and I've been coming here for months now, and just to reiterate what Mark said, as an educator, and I'm a credentialed teacher, and to watch the school buses stop right there at the corner. There are lots of kids in those apartments, and lately with the new RVs, there are kids living in there. They're running out into the street from behind the RVs. It's dangerous. Now there's a camper on the other side of the street, so visibility is really difficult. There's little kids playing in the area, and there is a school bus stop there. So it's a matter of concern, and people coming and going, the traffic, people driving on the wrong side of the road. Yesterday, I came home from a great weekend away in Lake Chelan, and to find the camper on the other side of the street and stuff in the middle of the street, so that I had to call the police to say you can hardly drive past it. So I had to drive on the wrong side of the road. It's just dangerous because then you can't see around the RVs. So again, thank you for your work on T Avenue. I understand this is really a difficult issue, but we have got to protect the kids. We can't have drugs in our community, and we have to do something. So, they're complex problems, but if you went to the hospital, and somebody came in with a gunshot wound and was bleeding out, and you realize they had an ingrown toenail, you wouldn't start there. You'd start, where they're bleeding out. We've got to protect our community from drugs, and people coming in and out on their bikes, in their cars, driving on the wrong side of the road, parking backwards, blocking the street, stopping, coming and going. It's constant all day long. And I wish I didn't have to just see it out my window. But thank you for your work. But I just feel strongly that we need to be really vigilant, because we can't afford to offer up our kids. It just takes one accident, for a kid, one mistaken decision, choice. And so thanks very much. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Bruce Banglian. Sorry, I always mess up your last name, sir.
Bruce Bagleen, and I live in Old Town. And my concern is the parking problem that the previous folks mentioned, but also parking at my house. So I live on 7th and M, and sometime during the Lori Gear administration, it was decided to put up no parking signs on my side of the street. M Avenue has become a truck route. It's a speeding route. It's where all of these stop signs were put in, so there's a protected speedway. And so I decided, well, I'm going to try to do what they do in Seattle and just park a car there. So I took my car out of the garage, parked it on my side of the street, park another car on the other side, it narrows the street, and the cars don't speed as much. So we've got these RVs parked there for months on end. They don't get tickets. They don't have current tabs on their license plates. They defecate on the street. I was walking by with my dog the other day going up to Cap Sandy, and somebody was changing their oil, and they basically just opened the plug, and it went right on the street. Okay, this is what we've got to work with. I'm parking my car there to try and make it slower. There's a Montessori school across the street. A dozen kids cross that street multiple times a day. I've got a $20 ticket, okay? Why is it that there is no parking on my side of the street? First off, I mean, and another reason I parked there is I planted trees, and the trees will get ripped out by the buses that don't really belong there. So that's all I have to say.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Anybody else wish to address the council on anything that's not on our agenda? Sure, come on up.
My name's Joe Lindholm, longtime resident, all my life resident of Anacortes, and I own a building on 30th and R, right between R and T. I'm sorry.
Yeah, a little bit closer to the microphone, thank you.
All right. Joe Lindholm, Anacortes, all my life. I own a building between R and T on 30th Avenue, and anyway, in support of the last three people that just talked, I haven't got the statistics that Mark had, but I go up to my building often. I'm a fisherman. I hang my gear, do my boat work, whatnot in that area. And it just sets my day off wrong to drive up T Avenue to get to my building. And I live on Cap Santa, by the way, and I have to go by Mary Ann's house a lot of times and see what's going on. And just a quickie here. Wife and I used to go to Seattle all the time, beautiful city. It ain't beautiful no more. And it's because we've let this happen. And Anacortes, great little community, and I don't care, politics, what have you, it ain't right. It isn't right to have people just squat or park their rigs and camp out and turn it into a junkyard. Now, I'm going to ask you one thing, Mr. Mayor. I understand Bellevue doesn't allow it. How come we can allow it? What is the difference? And I'd like to know that answer. I've called your office several times. I get referred to 911. They call me back. A sergeant at the police force calls, introduces himself, and contribute to the police force, do all the things that good citizens do, I think. But their hands are tied. They can't do a doggone thing. They go down, they warn people, they make them move 3 feet, 6 feet, whatever in the hell they move, and it becomes legal for them. So I'm just saying, I don't know politics, I don't know laws, but it seems to me we could pass an ordinance or some doggone thing to keep this community the beautiful place it is and should be forever. But we're turning it into a garbage dump. And it's going to happen, and when summer comes, there's going to be more. So thank you for listening. I haven't got any more.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? All right. Just for the public's knowledge, and again, appreciate of council's work with passing, I think last week, I signed in the ordinance for public controlled use of controlled substance in a public space, as well as the depositing of such materials. So that is not legal in Anacortes. So it's one more tool, but we're continuing to work the problem, whether it's on T Avenue or whether it's on 6th Street. It's a very challenging problem, but we will continue to work it. But thank you for the inputs. Okay, we are on to item number 5, which is our consent agenda, items A and B.
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Moulton.
I move to approve consent agenda items A and B.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Mr. Young to approve consent agenda items A and B. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We are on to item number 6, 6A. This is a continuation of a public hearing amending the 2023-2028 Capital Facilities Plan. And this is continued, like I said, from April 10th, 2023. I think Mr. Hoagland's going to kick this off. And this is a discussion item.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the audience. I believe this is the third consecutive week that we have had the public hearing open for the CFP amendment that was proposed. Our city code requires that we have a 2-week comment period and a public hearing, so we've met that requirement. Wanted to bring this back to council now. As far as the public comments goes, I haven't received anything in my office as far as public comment goes regarding the amendment, just informationally. But that's where we're at as far as our timeline for the CFP amendment goes in the public process.
So I did receive a visit at my office on the subject, and also an email that I think was also copied to council. So those were the only public comments I received. But I won't close the, if there's anyone here that would like to talk about the changes to the CFP, I'll entertain that now before I close the public hearing and turn it over to council. Okay.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I don't know if I got that email. What email are we referring to?
Oh, it came from Mr. Ward. Did it not? I thought that went to...
Oh, right.
Yep.
No, I did get that one.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
No, sorry, Mr. McKenzie. Thank you. Okay. All right. So I will go ahead and close the public hearing amending the 2023-2028 Capital Facilities Plan and turn the discussion over to council. And maybe to prime the discussion, Mr. Lunsford.
Mayor Miller, council, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. So we've had a few conversations about this topic. Mr. Hoagland is here to talk about any specifics in the ordinances. That's his expertise. I can talk to you about the depot. Some of us have had conversations about that. The desire is to amend the CFP so we can go out for a grant with the county through their county economic development grant. And we need to pass this in our CFP to be able to apply for that specific grant. Other grants don't require that, but this one does. This would allow us to raise funds. We can have a duration of the grant anytime that we set. Typically, we set them 2 to 3 years, but that's up to us. And the match is quite minimal. Well, we've had as low as 10%. So we've had this grant before. That's how we have the depot restroom on the pavilion. And then Fiber also received a grant, Miss Yu, I believe, recently as well. So these grants are familiar to us, and we've had some success. So we'd like to be able to add this to the CFP to be able to apply for this grant. I know that some had reservations about it. If we want to discuss those tonight, or you want to think about it some more, that's fine. It's really up to council. We'll stand by for your pleasure.
And I just want to make sure from council, the only issue of concern is changing the CFP with the depot pavilion. Is that everything else is good there? And then the other, and unfortunately I just pulled it off about an hour ago from OpenGov of all places, CFP, of what I'm trying to figure out exactly what you all want for what is in the CFP. And the example I pulled was the Community Recreation Center and the project description, which is construction of a community center, partnership with Anacortes Community, Boys and Girls Club, 2,100 square feet, building, regulation size gym, providing center for community recreation needs, Boys and Girls Club, potential lay space, attached picture is an example only, and then it has a cost estimate of $20 million. Again, that's the level of detail that's previously been in the CFP, but again, I'm looking for feedback, and I have not yet received any direct feedback from council besides last week.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
I'm not sure I would have picked that example because I objected to that example. I'm very supportive of the youth center. I objected when that was put into the capital facilities plan 2-3 years ago, and I object to its presence today because it's a $20 million expense with no expectation that we will ever spend $20 million to build that youth center. That's also not the current plan. The current plan is for the community to build the youth center. We shouldn't be putting items into the capital facilities plan without revenues attached to them, and the proposal here is just one line that has $800,000 in expenses for this thing at the depot, and so I've been pretty clear. I think my concern is how does this architecturally end up being compatible with the depot and compatible with the depot plaza. I imagine that maybe there's a way to make that happen, but I can't figure that out, and so I am not willing at this point to risk the depot and risk what we have there without more of a design. Now, you know, we have talked about a couple of, we've had 2 meetings about this already, right? And at one point we were saying, well, we're just going after the grant for design money, but we can go after design money from lodging tax funds. An events center is a specifically allowed use from lodging tax, spends no general revenue on it. We could do that now. We could get a design. We could come back next year if that design is compatible with what we want. And it may not be that that works at the depot at all. Maybe there is some other location that is yielded out of a process that starts with what are our requirements, what are the possibilities for property, where can it go, what does it need, and then get to design. I guess my point is that we're not really following those steps, and I'm not willing to sign off on this at this point. The county economic development money that is available, the .09 funds in this grant opportunity, I suppose we could apply for that for an event center. We could also apply for it for fiber. We were awarded money for fiber last year. We know that we are going to have that expense going forward. That expense will be general fund paid for. So what we really ought to do is figure out how to backfill general revenue rather than this project, which if we were pursuing it, could be spent out of lodging tax money. And then we also apparently asked the legislature to fund this project, which again is not designed yet. The one project that we know is not funded, besides fiber, that we're pursuing this year is the skate park. And we had pledged to kick in some REIT to the skate park, which we were willing to do because we thought we were so close to that and being able to fund that, and because we had a donor of $500,000 for the skate park, and because it's important to the kids. But now we've gotten bids back, and bids are higher than we anticipated, and we don't have enough money yet to close that gap. That would have been a great project to go after legislative appropriation for. Maybe we could make the case that it's economic development as well. I don't know. Maybe we could apply for 2 projects, but that would be one that I would prioritize over this one, because this depot project does not have the benefit of having a design that we are comfortable with at this point. So we also don't have estimates of costs, and this is maybe to Mayor Miller's point about the level of detail in the community center, but we should have estimate of costs if we're embarking on this. We should have estimate of operating costs, maintenance costs. The port employs an event coordinator. Do we need an event coordinator? Those are the types of things that we should always expect in our capital facilities plan, and because we don't have that here, it is an indicator that this project isn't fully baked and isn't ready and hasn't yet earned my vote.
Yeah, exactly the kind of feedback that I'm looking for. But the other piece is the timeliness. The reason that it's not necessarily fully baked was, like I mentioned before, like I've mentioned a couple weeks in a row, this was kind of based on a timeliness issue with the Port Transit transit shed closing at the end of the year, with working with MJB, which I had you all informed as I was working with MJB of what was going on there, and then this opportunity showed itself. So, you know, if you tell me it's not timely and I shouldn't be working the staff towards, you know, trying to at least get something ready for 2024, that's fine. I'm good with that. But that's part of the reason it's not maybe as fleshed out or baked as much as we would like. But I will say the $800,000 number did not come out of thin air. It came out of working with a local contractor, local architect, and our city engineer to get estimates of some concept that has, you know, power, water, lighting, solar capability, not commercial kitchen, not bathrooms, but other than that, pretty much had everything else. So, not out of thin air. Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. I would have liked to have seen some of that information in one of these packets over the last couple of weeks as well. I agree with Mr. Walters. I feel like this project isn't ready, and I don't want to be constrained by a timeline of 2 weeks from now or 10 days or whatever it is on a project that I'm not comfortable moving forward at this time. I think also it wouldn't be done, and I think it's fair to say it wouldn't be completed in time for the Port Transit shed to be closed and us to step in and fill that gap, much as wonderful that would be. I would also like to see us maybe work with some existing events centers and places, whether that's the Swinomish Casino or whether it's the Samish and their nice facility at Fidalgo RV Resort, whether we do something with the Eagles Hall, that I'm not sure what's happening there, whether we do something with the senior center where maybe we can figure out a way to have alcohol there. I just feel that there are different size venues that are pretty close to town that we could use in the interim potentially successfully as we work further with the community, who I actually haven't heard support from for this idea either, to move forward in a more in a different kind of progression. Yeah, I'm just not ready.
Ms. Cleland.
Well, I wasn't here last week, but I spoke on it a couple weeks ago. I guess my hesitation is the fact that it's not just the design, it's also the fact that we haven't really determined what the purpose of this building is going to be. We've heard it's for the farmers market and we've heard it's for large events. I think that if it's for the farmers market, there is a way to create a shelter on that plaza that doesn't destroy the plaza. It might be an L shape, it might be something else, but I don't think, I'm confused as to what we're trying to achieve with this large metal building, other than filling a gap immediately within the next year. And that's fine. I think that's an admirable, it's admirable to try to fill that gap for our community. I don't think it's fair to the integrity and the design of the depot and the historic nature of that space to think short-term with it. I think that's what, as I said before, it's one of the few large open spaces that the community still owns. And as we see the dog park go away, as we see a lot of our kind of flex parking areas, a lot of those undeveloped spaces around our town, they're going to be developed, and this is kind of our one spot that the city owns that we need to be very thoughtful with what, if we do any changes to it, how those changes look. I also think that I also have a personal issue with putting this in the CFP, asking for the money without honestly feeling like this is a project I'm confident we should move forward. I don't want to be put in a position where we now have received money from the county and now we're saying, actually, no, we don't want to have that. This is not what we're looking for. So I am fine considering some kind of, if there's a change to the Depot Plaza, I think that has to be done thoughtfully, and it needs to be done over a number of years. I mean, our original Depot master plan is from, I think, 2006 or 2008. I think that we should really go back and look at that. There's been some changes not only to our community, but also improvements done to the plaza, and we need to make sure that we're thoughtful with any changes. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I really, yeah, I'm not quite, I don't feel comfortable moving it forward in good faith.
Well, I think you hit on what I challenged the council last week with. I don't know, is it 70% trying to solve the 70% trying to solve the transit shed issue, or 30%, or 90%, or 100? You know, that's what I've been asking the council. So I appreciate that feedback of, you know, are we going to try to solve the farmers market not challenge, but well, they would say that when the wind's coming out of the southeast by 25 knots and trying to have a farmers market, but you know, whether that's the rule. It just thought that it could be a two birds with one stone kind of thing. That was the idea. But what the what percentage? I don't have that answer. That's why we're asking. Mr. Lunsford, do you want to chime in?
I think that, you know, people have raised those points. I think the farmers market does want some sort of shelter system down there. I mean, everyone can agree we want to protect the integrity of the depot and the plaza. I don't think that's a question for anyone who's proposing this or considering, you know, hitting pause or hitting stop altogether. The historic nature of the depot and its function for the community are very important for everyone. Can you develop something that can solve two problems with an event center and shelter for the farmers market? I think you can. If it's council's consideration that that needs to be done in a more drawn-out process, then that's certainly a reasonable position. If we can find ways to meet the mayor's goal of providing community with a place for events, I mean, that's I think really what has hit some of the urgency for this, to fill that niche that people depend upon us, and we're trying to find a way to do that. And the places that we have the depot doesn't quite work because it's not, you know, it's an old train station, right? It's not meant for an event center. The senior center could be. So we want to work together to try to solve that problem and do so in a way that benefits the community. So whether it be LTAC we use to do a plan, whether it be this .09 grant, the economic development we use to do that, we're open to those suggestions. I think we all agree that we want something that fits there and that benefits the community in the long run. And then we have this urgency of trying to solve this problem that, you know, we've inherited with the ending of the events, the transit shed. So those are the things that are pushing us as staff, and the mayor, I know, we've had long discussions about it. So that's what's pushing us, and so that's what we're trying to solve tonight.
Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mayor Miller. You know, hearing the opinions of my fellow council members, and I truly understand and respect the hesitancy, and also the concerns, you know, because we do have a wonderful community here, of course. We want to continue with the continuity of the look that we have. We want to also make sure that we're giving service to the community for which we all were elected to serve, to bring forward those things that sometimes are easy to do and then sometimes difficult to do. Where I disagree is that I believe that this is something that our community can really use. I think that the opportunity we have right now, given the fact that we are a small city, that we are attracting people here, that, you know, even in the example that the transit shed did for us, it provided a venue downtown, which is important to me, to try to be as much downtown as possible, helps our downtown be vibrant, helps even in the construction of housing and the developments that we're doing right now. It helps that walkability, that entertainment section, whether or not that's even helping in the Arts Council in, you know, the arts district that we're trying to create right here. So downtown is important, and it's important that the venues be downtown. Do we have enough? No. You know, I think that there are places we can use better, But, the truth is, who's going to go, as much as I love the facility out there, Samish facility, it's way out. You still have to get in your car and drive back. And part of what we've been working on as a city is trying to make it as walkability as possible, the ability to bike, or the ability to just sort of connect all of those pieces. MJB's property, as I said, and I won't say it many more times, is a nucleus within the MJB property. And in that nucleus, it has its own city core or development core. And that's not necessarily what's going to help us downtown and begin to address these issues. I just don't. I think when we talk about plaza and design, that's something down the road, sure. Of course we want it to be fit in with all of the things that are necessary. That's just who we are as people, and that's just not something we're going to do something outlandish. And we all are going to have an opinion on it. But all this really was about was creating an opportunity to have access to some dollars that are there to help us begin to address this need. Mr. Walters, my esteemed colleague, has many times mentioned the LTAX dollars. LTAX dollars is designed to bring heads and beds. Yes, some of the events that we're looking to do and bring people and heads to our city and help us is part of what that's really all about. But, again, it's not necessarily designed to bring buildings into existence. Now, because this particular facility might and could attract other events here to the area and bringing in heads and beds, that may meet it. But, by not using the opportunity that we have with the county, with other donors that may be out in the community, I think we lose. Because then what we're saying is, just because we have this one pocket of money that might possibly work for it, let's just use that. But we're ignoring the huge opportunity that we have. We have, and I know, again, Ms. Cleland McGrath, is trying to preserve some of the open spaces that we have. True, it's true. But we have, 3,000 acres of parks and set aside? Even in our development plans, you can't really develop without a park. We got more parks than any other place that I know about. We got open space. Is that something we're going to lose by simply doing this one thing? I said no, because it's part of who we are as people, what makes our city beautiful, part of the core of what we put forward. That's not changing. That's not. So, again, I just think that when we talk about, support, again, I am one of 7. And each of us on this council brings a strength to the table. Each of us brings an opinion. We have a great council. We truly do. But all of us have a different opinion about sometimes how things can be done. But the end goal is that we serve a community that we all love and that we've committed ourselves as public servants to give our best toward creating. I differ than my colleagues in its urgency. I agree with them when it comes to design issues being at hand, when it comes to utilizing spaces. I totally agree with that. But I see an opportunity for money. I see an opportunity if we could word it appropriately. Maybe we can get access and see where we go. A plan that we put forward in a comprehensive plan is not a permanent document. It is a fluid instrument that's reluctantly changed and deliberately put information in that we want to go forward. I recognize that. But by simply doing an exploratory look, we lose nothing. So, again, with each of us only having one vote on this issue, my vote will be for moving it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carter, do you want to weigh in?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would have to, I like to thank everyone for their comments, and I agree with Mr. Young that, I mean, we were looking at putting something down there. And to me, it makes sense that being able to make the structure dual purpose to accommodate everyone, keeping everyone downtown, keeping everyone being able to go to the businesses, the local, instead of drawing them away to somewhere else makes sense to me. And I don't see, I understand Mr. Walter's point of view, but being able to put it on the facilities plan to take a little bit more time to get the funds together to get it to where we need it to be just makes sense. And so I would vote along with the way Mr. Young is.
Okay. Well, I thought that was a great discussion. I'll just add one more. The other to add to the dilemma is there's no guarantee of the .09 funds, whether it's for fiber or whether it's for the Depot Pavilion or something else that we dream up. So just to add to your quandary there. But we will bring out, the plan will be, we'll bring this back next week and for a vote of whether to keep it in or take it out. So,
Mayor Miller,
yeah.
is there any reason we wouldn't vote tonight?
Well, I mean, we had it on the agenda as a discussion item, but.
I think item 7.
Oh, so never mind. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So 7B.
Yeah,
oh,
we're
sorry.
still on 6A. So I guess we'll move on from 6A over to the meat of the matter. It's to 7A, and which is other business. And ordinance 4047 amending the 2023. Yeah.
Mayor Miller?
Yeah, Mr. Walters.
Yeah, 6A is the public hearing on it,
Yep.
7A is the action item, yeah.
Yep.
So,
Close the public hearing on 6A, and you're ready to discuss item 7A.
right.
Okay.
Which is also the item
Yes.
of 6A, yeah. So, if you tell me that we just need money to explore this, I'm in favor of exploring an event center. I absolutely think that we need to have a public event center suitable for replacement of the transit shed. I don't want to tell people that they should go out to the Swinomish Casino. It's outside the city limits. It's not downtown, for all the reasons that have been articulated here. An event center in the core of Anacortes is something that we should have. We should have a place that people can gather because it's important for our community. It's important for connecting people to their downtown and to our downtown businesses. Having that be either on Commercial Avenue or on the waterfront or at the depot, any of those places are fine until we start talking about changing the architecture of the depot site. For me, if you were presenting a proposal to locate this facility in some other vacant lot, the dog park lot, which we don't own, is not a real proposal, but if it were there, then I would be more inclined to say maybe this is worth spending money on, or at least seeing if the county would fund a grant, and then maybe we go after it if we don't have to spend our own money. However, the grant opportunity is not for the full amount of the expense. It's only for $500,000. Do I have that right? $400,000. So that leaves another $4. However, because we're talking about the depot, which is a facility, it's on the National Register of Historic Places. It is, which I don't know that that carries any particular teeth that would prevent us from altering the site, but it is on that register because of the recognition of the site as something that should be preserved, as something that's important to our history. And like Ms. Cleland McGrath says, maybe there is something that we could add to the depot site that would be in keeping with the character of the site and would benefit the farmers market. I don't see us as being able to pull that off for the purpose of an event center that is of the size and scale and planning for the future, even if it's a relatively cheap one, because $800,000 is not very much money when you're talking about a building that can handle the number of people that we need. So I wouldn't pursue this, and I would step back and say, let's go through a planning process, let's identify some other sites. I just do not think that we are going to get to an architecturally compatible building on the depot site. Let's see what else we can do. We just had a meeting with the Arts Festival about their new proposed building on the site of the cinema, and maybe that's a possibility. We just heard from the Eagles Club that they're building another historic building in Anacortes, which I think also is on the National Historic Register. They are currently closed, and they're looking at possibilities for how they might be able to renovate or afford renovations and reopen. That might be another possibility. I don't know that these sites or these other potentials meet the goals, but also I haven't seen an articulation of exactly what all those goals are. It's the process that I think, and a public process, that would help us get to where it is we need to go. So I would step back from this. I wouldn't adopt, I guess, either the ordinance or the proposed budget amendment, because it also includes an $800,000 expenditure from Parks Capital Fund, and I don't know what the balance is of that fund, but I'm not particularly inclined to spend $400,000 from that fund at this point. It would be fine with me if we spent lodging tax money, which is specifically allowed for capital expenditures related to tourism facilities. We need consent of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, but that fund could fund some planning and design work, including identification of possible sites. And that would be the right approach at this point to try to figure out what to do.
Yeah, and just to provide a little more background, I think the staff worked hard to try to identify possible sites. Again, this came out of the main site we were looking at was the MJB property, and that did not pan out unless you thought I made a bad decision of not spending $600,000 on something that was going to disappear in 2 years. Maybe that was a bad decision. But anyway, there aren't any other city sites that I am aware of, city-owned property for a 6,000 foot. 6,000 foot translates to a 300 to 350 person sit-down area. So again, like all great inputs, and it sounds like the timeliness argument is there's less enthusiastic than I had, but I'm a problem solver, and I try to solve things in a timely fashion, but that's okay. I hear the council. But to the point about voting, though, there are 2 council members that are missing, and typically it's been the practice of the council to try to get as much input as possible on something important like this. But Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mayor Miller. I want to be clear. This is not a loosey-goosey approach. It really isn't. This has been a lot of thought been put into how and service and what some of the needs of the community are. And it has been really a need that the community have spoken about since I've been on council. You know, whether or not the farmers market, which is one of the groups that could use the facility, and then there are others that could use the facility. I was at the farmers market on Saturday, and again, it was raining, but you know, again, it was a wonderful place. It really is. And you know, I talked with many of the vendors that were there. They were sort of jammed in, especially the depot, the covered side of where we are, and those that were on the outside, you know, of course, were shivering just a little bit in that process. But the point was made and heard by all of them is that there is a utility for our community. There is a utility for whether or not we have events there of some type, not specifically speaking to a formal dinner. I agree with our colleagues here. Yes, you know, and Mr. Walters, as well as Ms. Cleveland McGrath and Ms., of course, Moulton. You know, we have a need in the community. We have spaces that could be used. But the question for me was, if this is available resources we have at our disposal that could enhance our community, enhance the quality of life that we're seeking to have, then I think it should be considered. And so what I think was attempting to happen by the mayor and the staff and the team in bringing this forward, when the opportunity and the negotiations was clear that the port wasn't going to extend and that MJB property wanted more than what we were willing to give to help meet this need, then part of that is why this was brought forward for consideration. No, the design is not made. No, this is just all about deciding and taking a look and seeing if this is something that could work. Again, the operative word is could it work or could it not work? And the only way you're going to know sometimes is that seed capital. You know, again, I do think LTAC could help in the seed capital, but that is a decision by the LTAC committee itself. And if the city were to make an application, it would come before the whole committee, and the committee as a whole would vote on what that is. But, you know, again, this wasn't a loosey-goosey approach, and I just wanted to be clear to that. Thank you.
Okay, so again, it is a discussion, possible action on both ordinance 4047 and 4048. Again, the plan was to bring it back next week, but we have a placeholder for it. If you want to ask more questions, provide more input, I'm all for it, and bring our other council members hopefully back. But the only issue, just to make sure, the only issue is the Depot Pavilion, right? Get a head nod that that's as far as the changes to the budget ordinance.
Aren't we still on ordinance?
Yeah, capital facility plan. Sorry, yeah.
7A, right?
Yeah.
We haven't moved to 7B yet.
We are on 7A, correct?
Okay.
Sorry. But I can bring that back next week. Okay. Okay.
Mayor Miller?
Okay.
We do have a recommended motion if we were to not, I mean, I am not going to so move. I would have an alternative action, but I haven't really done this before, but.
You could send it to us and we could have two motions on the, if you want to do that.
Or I could make a motion right now if I know how to do it, which is to, which I'm not sure how to do this. I'm sure someone with more experience can help me out, but I would move to remove ordinance number 4047 from consideration. I'm not sure the protocol.
Mayor Miller?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Hoagland.
So the CFP amendment is required to take place in conjunction with the budget amendment. However, a budget amendment can be made on a standalone basis. So if you, I guess my recommendation would be to go ahead and vote on the CFP amendment and then move to the budget amendment.
Yeah, hopefully that made sense. It almost made sense to me.
So.
Or if you're asking to modify the agenda to remove the CFP amendment, then the budget amendment could stay.
Because the CFP amendment is, 7A is only what we see on the left side of the screen. Is that correct?
Correct.
So yeah, I think that's what you were getting at, Ms. Moulton.
I think so too. So what my goal was to approve ordinance 4048 without the $800,000 for the Depot Pavilion.
Understood. Yeah, so I think the motion would be to make a motion to strike 4047.
Yeah, and that is the only item in the CFP amendment is the Depot Pavilion. So,
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
I don't think we want to amend the agenda because we are already on this agenda item.
Okay.
Ms. Moulton, you could make, you could move to approve ordinance 4047. You could then vote against it. Or you could move to postpone consideration indefinitely of ordinance 4047, which is the motion we have used in the past, to not take action on an item. We could then follow up ordinance 4048 with an amendment and vote on that, or we could bring it back next week in its amended form. I hope I've provided you some options.
Ms. Cleland?
I feel like if this had come up during the budget time, right, of November, December, and been put in kind of a vague way that we deal with the CFP, which is part of the challenges we always come to in November and December, that we really need to do a deep dive of the CFP at a committee level throughout the year before we bring it to the budget time, this probably would have gotten through, possibly, most likely. But it's not. It's been brought up right now, and we're under the wire because of the fact that you've brought a proposal that you want to try to use this .09 money to do this project. And because I know kind of the next steps that are in line, the reason of putting it in now versus later, I cannot support it because of the fact that it will be a detriment to the depot. And it specifically says this is for the depot plaza. So I move to approve ordinance 4047, amending the 2023 to 2028 CFP.
Second?
Okay. I have a motion, but I'll do this slowly to make sure we get it right. Motion by Ms. Cleveland McGrath and a second by Ms. Moulton to approve ordinance 4047, amending the 2023 capital facilities plan. Any additional discussion? Okay, Mr. Franciac, would you take the vote, please? Okay, additional discussion, Mr. Young.
Thank you. Would you tell us what we're doing here, just to be very clear?
To be very clear, there's been a motion and a second to approve ordinance 4047, which would amend the capital facilities plan to include I'll read, amended to add the depot pavilion budget year 2023 at estimated cost of $800,000. So yes, the motion was to approve, and Mr. Franciac, take the vote, please.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
No.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
No.
Ms. Moulton.
No.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Motion fails.
All right, thank you. We are moving on to item 7A, sorry, 7B. I'm having trouble with that all night. Ordinance 4048, amending the 2023 annual budget. This is a discussion item with possible action. Mr. Hoagland.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a few items here. We mentioned these a couple weeks ago. We touched on these briefly, but to recap, the unmanned aerial vehicle that the police department purchased with a donation, that purchase actually took place in the current year, 2023, so we're asking for a budget amendment for that item because it rolled from the previous budget year to the current year. The body camera purchase, the police department made that purchase on a contract. I think it was a 3 or 4 year contract. They got a grant for it at the beginning of that term. So this is essentially just adding this year's payment into the budget using that existing grant money. And then the Fire Station 3 purchase that recently took place for $1.8 million, that's not in the current budget, so requesting addition of that into the fire budget. I do want to clarify that long-term loan item that is holding the resource line. What I would like to do is bring back a short-term financing in the form of an interfund loan to kind of provide essentially bridge funding through the end of the year until such time as we go out into either the bond market or use a commercial bank to obtain a loan on a long-term basis. But the interim would be a short-term and then replaced with a long-term loan. And then if council is to take action on this, then obviously we would remove that 800,000 from the depot line item from this budget amendment as well. So it'd be modified in that way.
So we could bring it back in a modified form, or you can take action and we'll make sure for the record to remove it. So, but
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
So the lines here in the table about the depot pavilion, the county grant is 800,000, but the possibility, the max possibility from the county grant is 400,000.
Yes.
5? Oh, 4 or 500,000. There's still a delta of 3 or 400,000. So.
Yeah, so I didn't make, I thought about that earlier today, actually. I didn't make that edit because it was unclear where those other funds would come from. My hope would be that it would come from another grant source, lodging tax being one of those likely. It's not something we typically refer to as a grant, but that was my thinking. It would be made up in terms of another grant or perhaps an operating transfer from a different fund. But that was the thinking behind that general line of grant funds, recognizing that the county grant wouldn't provide that full amount of resource that was required for that project. Yeah, let me know if I answered that question or not. It's a little bit confusing. But I believe at this point it's kind of a moot point.
Yeah. So I guess we need to strike those two lines because there's not the possibility of a county grant without its inclusion in the CFP. Do we want to bring that back next week with those lines struck, or
be happy
just strike
to.
them now?
Either way, yeah, council's decision. I can do it either way.
Bring it, okay, I'll look for head nods. Either a motion with the modification, which can sometimes be challenging, or we can bring it back cleaned up. Bring it back for next week.
Mayor Miller?
Yeah, Ms. Moulton.
I kind of feel like we should just do it.
Okay.
Okay, so I move that we approve ordinance 4048, amending the 2023 annual budget with the amendments that Mr. Hoagland detailed.
Second.
Okay, I think we got this. Ordinance, motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Mr. Young to approve ordinance 4048, amending the 2023 annual budget with the removal of the references as discussed with regards to the depot pavilion. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, would you take the vote, please?
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Ms. Cleo McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Good discussion. And we're moving on to item 7C, opioid settlement agreement. This is a discussion item with possible action. And Ms. Swetnam will be presenting.
Oh, apologies. Thank you, Mayor Miller and members of council and members of the audience. So tonight, I'm hoping this is a discussion with action item. And this is a new state allocation agreement settling with a number of opioid pharmacies and manufacturers. So it's been a while since we talked about the city's participation in some of the national opioid litigation that's going on. So I just wanted to kind of refresh the background and the rationale for our participation. So since the 1990s, sales of opioids have increased tenfold. Addiction has led to illegal opioid abuse, and that abuse has cost communities. So we've talked about this, but the estimate is that it costs the United States $78.5 billion a year, and it also costs lives. This county, Skagit County, saw 66 opioid deaths between the years of 2012 and 2016. There are three main manufacturers that the city has, along with other jurisdictions, filed suit against, and those are Purdue, Janssen, and endo. And those lawsuits were based on the fact that there was substantial evidence that those manufacturers misrepresented the addictive properties of their products. They represented that their products were suitable for long-term pain relief. They downplayed the addictive qualities of these products, and they acted contrary to good industry science. So the city and 36 other local agencies in the state of Washington filed complaint in federal district court against Purdue, Janssen, and Endo for their roles in the opioid epidemic. And the causes of action were based in the Washington Consumer Protection Act, public nuisance, negligence, and RICO violations. So the good news is that there was, I think to date, the largest settlement of any opioid lawsuit that was reached last year. The state attorney general's office worked hard to settle with these three main distributors for $518 million, and the agreement was that it would be a 50-50 split between the state and local agencies within the state. So all 36 local plaintiffs plus 88 additional local governments that had populations over $10,000 joined in the settlement. And to kind of address how those funds get distributed and used, there was a One Washington Memorandum of Understanding that was entered into, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. The net to local agencies was $215 million over 17 years. So Anacortes has actually received $28,436.58 recently, which represents the payments for years 1 and 2 of the settlement. We get those funds directly wired to the city. So there is a new settlement, and that settlement is similar to what was reached in the Purdue Janssen Endo case. It was negotiated by the state attorney general Bob Ferguson's office with Walmart, CVS, and Walgreens, that were pharmacies who prescribed these opioids, and Teva and Allergan, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who are manufacturers. This settlement is a little bit larger than the previous one, up to $217 million over 15 years, and that amount is contingent on all local agencies joining in. The deadline to join is tomorrow. And to join, the mayor needs to sign the allocation agreement too, which is nearly identical to the allocation agreement that the city executed in the previous settlement amount. So if the city joins, we could receive, assuming all the local agencies join as well, $355,076 over 15 years, in addition to what we're already receiving under the previous settlement agreement. So I want to talk a little bit about the One Washington MOU, because I have gotten questions over the past couple of years about what could these funds be used for and what's the city's take of these bigger settlements. So the city signed this One Washington MOU on March 29th of 2022. And the MOU is between all of the Washington municipalities that are listed in Exhibit B to that agreement, which is actually attached in your packet as well. And that agreement governs how settlement proceeds are to be allocated amongst the local jurisdictions and how they are to be used. One thing I want to mention that's not really central to the discussion tonight, but you will see coming up in the future, is that regions are required to establish opioid abatement councils to coordinate the use of funds. We're coordinating with Whatcom, Skagit, Snohomish, Island, and San Juan counties. So it's going to take a minute to get everybody together to get those agreements in place. So there are allowed uses of these proceeds. One of the categories is for treatment. We can use the funds to treat opioid use disorder. We can use funds to support people in treatment and recovery, to connect people who need help to the help they need, to address the needs of criminal justice involved persons as those issues relate to opioid use disorder, and address the needs of pregnant or parenting women and their families, including babies with neonatal abstinence syndrome. We can also use the funds for prevention to prevent overprescribing and ensure appropriate prescribing and dispensing of opioids, to prevent the misuse of opioids, and to prevent overdose deaths and other harms. There are other strategies that can be used to use the funds. First, with respect to first responders, law enforcement expenditures related to opioids, education of first responders, leadership planning and coordination. We can use the funds for local planning to respond to the opioid crisis, local tracking, infrastructure, staff resources, and then training and research. So the allocation amount, how much money is the city getting? So under the One Washington MOU, the city of Anacortes gets 0.177496290.6% of any settlement amount. The total that's coming into the county is 1.69% of any statewide settlement that's reached. So I just got this chart today from the city's outside counsel. This breaks down the amount of money that the city can expect based on year. This first column that says distributor, those are the proceeds that the city can expect to receive under the previous settlement of the distributor lawsuits. And then Walmart, Allergen, Teva, CVS, and Walgreens are listed out below. So the total of these 5 new additional settlements will add up to the $355,000. So the alternative to participating in the settlement agreement is for the city to litigate against these pharmacies manufacturers on our own, not advisable, and our neighboring jurisdiction's ability to recover is also dependent on our participation as well. So staff is recommending that the council authorize the mayor to execute the allocation agreement 2 and participation forms to join the settlement between the state of Washington and Walmart, Allergen, Teva, CVS, and Walgreens. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about that.
Okay, Mr. Young.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. I particularly like the drops that were going out in the different heads to show the effect of the drugs, and it's a visual that I think leaves nothing to the imagination, but clearly defines its effect on the public and users. So again, wonderfully done. I'm very much in support of this. I think, you know, this is the best I think we can get, particularly given the enormity of costs that went into getting to this point, and then the negotiated pieces to reach a consensus where everyone can move forward. I do think, though, you know, I'm just curious about this. Who decides on the use of the dollars? I guess what I'm saying is, I know that, you know, when you were speaking of all of the opportunities that it could be used for, all of those are tremendous needs, because we already are paying simply by sending our forces out to arrest. We're paying in jail costs. We're paying in all of the other ills that's associated with drug use, you know, just everything around it. It is a collateral damage that happens to all of us. So, you know, again, I was curious about, are we as a city deciding how that money could be used? Because again, we do have you know, social worker issues. We have resources, because, you know, we're trying to find not only how do we begin to address the issue of drug use, because it's in every single city, even when you believe it's not in yours, it is. And so, you know, how do we begin to use that? And then, you know, how do we support those agencies that are helping to solve some of the issues in the recovery? And, you know, how do we do that? Because all of those are costs, and I know it's not going to be enough for everybody. It's just not. But that's really where I'm looking for a little bit. I'm supportive of this, but I was curious about that.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I had the same question as well, especially when I saw the requirements that the city has to establish an opioid abatement council. Does that take away some of the city's agency about how to use funds? I asked that question directly, and no, it doesn't. The city is receiving the funds directly from the, there's a third-party company that distributes the settlement proceeds. We are required to withhold 10% of the amount that we receive to cover administrative costs of the opioid abatement council. I think that the purpose of the Opioid Abatement Council is to recognize that while this is a significant sum of money, it's not enough to solve the problem. So maybe by asking regions to coordinate, they can pool resources to make better use of those dollars. But ultimately, the decision about how the remaining 90% of the proceeds are to be used rests with the city. So.
But I think there are some reporting requirements to make sure we spend it on those things that are on the list.
There's a lot of complicated structure that was negotiated and built in settling these cases. So certainly there's going to be some reporting and some coordination with the Opioid Abatement Council. So,
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters?
There's been lots reported in the media lately, especially about fentanyl and how it has emerged from this opioid crisis, from the prescription opioid crisis. I don't claim to understand how the pharmacies are really on the hook here, how they are at fault, but clearly they are, since they are settling. But $500 million a year for the state of Washington. Combine that even with the $500 million from the manufacturers, multiply by 50, spread over 17 years, it doesn't come anywhere close to what you said here is $78.5 billion. What $78.5 billion in actual damages that the United States is experiencing as a result of having to treat opioid addiction. The people that we see on our streets now who are addicted to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, and so many other consequences of this. It certainly is not enough, and we should try hard to make smart decisions about how to spend this little amount of money that they're actually providing, and maybe plowing that into the interlocal drug task force, for example, is the right approach. But there also isn't another option for us, as you described. We're not going to litigate this ourselves, and we're not going to endanger the settlement agreement by not participating. So I guess I would move, and I would invite any other council comments as well, because this is such a significant national social issue now. But I would move that staff authorize. I would move that council authorize the mayor to execute the allocation agreement to and the relevant participation forms to join the settlement.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Walters, a second by Mr. Young to authorize the allocation agreement as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, could you take the vote, please?
Ms. Cleland-McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, I've moved out of the sevens and on to item 8, which is adjournment. If there's no further business before the council, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.